Welcome to part 2 of our Chaos Clarity webinar series. By the end of this session, you'll have a clear picture of what changes when you build your AI tools on a platform that is integrated with your data and gives you the security control you need for your business. So let's hop into it. Today is really about moving from that siloed solution that we saw in the previous webinar to real-time answers on your ERP data. So if you've ever struggled with needing answers but not having the report you need, or maybe you have a sales team that just won't log in to your BI tool, or maybe you're frustrated that the data you're looking at is hours old. So we'll show how a platform can change that, specifically the Rover AI platform. So the next step after a question isn't building or hunting for a report, it's getting an answer and acting on that answer. So we'll do a short walkthrough of the platform, a live demo. Mike is going to touch on the security aspect of the Rover platform. And as always, this session is going to be recorded and we'll send the slides afterwards. So our goal today is replace report hunting with real-time answers. And real quick, for those of you who weren't able to join the last webinar, my name's Tyler Hansen. I'm an implementation consultant at ZoomAssist. And before that, I was director of technology for a plumbing and HVAC distributor. And in that role, I really got an opportunity to build out quite a few internal AI tools and find what works and what doesn't. And with me is Mike Wright, CTO here at ZoomAssist. And like I mentioned earlier, Mike will dive into more of the security aspects and kind of how our platform works. So last time we explored AI within ChatGPT, and useful, right? But as you experiment and play around with AI, you'll probably find yourself hitting a wall eventually on ChatGPT. So without integration, you can't necessarily ask, hey, what's my inventory right now? Or which orders have come in since noon today? Or how did this morning's production schedule go? So to really unlock AI, you probably start to see why that lack of integration can become an issue. So today we'll show how building your AI tools on a platform like Rover AI can change that. Rover AI can connect directly to your ERP and surrounding systems so you can get real-time answers. So just like how we saw in the last webinar, how a good prompt is kind of the foundation of a good AI assistant, and we use the build framework specifically, today we'll see how a platform for that assistant is really that next layer. So a couple of weeks ago, I got to attend a SHIMS and MIS user conference, and there were some really great discussions happening around what challenges are being faced in day-to-day operations. And 3 points that really stuck out to me that are important to consider with AI as well are, one, a lot of us are dealing with the frustration of data that was refreshed 12 hours ago. Maybe your BI tool gets refreshed 3 times a day. Maybe it gets refreshed every hour even, but it can be hard to make real-time decisions with that type of lag. And 2, if finding one number takes 5 clicks and a filter, people stop logging into that tool and they stop using it like they should be. Even if it seems simple to you, it can be difficult to drive that adoption. And most of us are dealing with data that is not perfect. And cleansing that data before it reaches the reporting software, or in our case, the AI assistant, can be manual and time consuming. So that's why a platform matters when building these assistants. And a couple of other things to touch on the importance of a platform. So one thing that I've found, and you may too with AI, is more people in your company might be using it than you even realize. But their AI assistant might live on their personal ChatGPT account, which isn't ideal, obviously. So bringing those mini projects onto a central platform can be a huge step forward in AI adoption and knowledge sharing across the company, and obviously a huge step forward for security of your data. And additionally, most business workflows need more than just a chat box. They need access to call APIs. They need access to maybe do calculations. And that point touches a little on part 3 of the webinar with building agents, but I did just want to bring it up because it's an important thing to consider when you're really building out that platform. So again, a platform brings assistants, data sets, and integrations together and supports those processes in a secure way. So it pains me to say it, but there is no such thing as perfect data. And we've all probably heard garbage in, garbage out. And it's especially important with an AI assistant. It does need to have good data, and we may not have good data. So with Rover AI, you're able to cleanse that data a little bit before it hits the assistant. So it leaves your ERP, you can perform some cleansing and then provide it to that assistant. And that's huge. And you can do that in a scalable and automated way. And I'll show that on the platform here. But like I said, it's a really powerful tool to have right inside your platform. And one other point is models. And again, just a quick recap on models. That's what your question is being fed to essentially, and what you're getting the answer from. Model choice is going to change. It evolves monthly on what the best model choice is. So to have a platform where instead of having to rip out and completely rebuild an assistant when you need to switch to a new model, if you can simply switch a new model in, it's going to save a ton of time, and it's just the reality of how fast things are moving right now. AI is not going away, but the model providers certainly could. So that's why it's important to be able to easily switch between those models. And I'm going to pass it over to Mike here for a few slides to help us understand kind of that inner workings a little better.
Perfect. Thanks, Tyler. That's the fun part. I know everybody came to hear about the technical inner workings, but the nice thing about our platform as the platform for you, instead of having to interface directly with your ERP and other systems, is you get that, like, it's a separation of concerns in a way here. So you're creating a foundational layer for you to be able to do a lot of things with and then re-leverage for a lot of purposes. That's not going to be constrained by your ability to make adjustments to your ERP or other systems of record. You're going to have the flexibility of being able to marry in data from other sources too. So many organizations out there, right? You've got data scattered around a lot of places. Even the simplest of companies who run the ERP and then run everything in Google, you're going to have a collection of Google Docs and Google Sheets that supplements the business outside of the ERP. So having our platform here for you as that unification layer is nice because it gives you a space to work and be a little bit more plug and play, not just with respect to the models, but also with respect to where the data is coming from, so that you don't have to disrupt the business in those other spaces where business exists and is continuing. And you're getting all of that just through secure connections. I mean, now, that said, if you expose access to your ERP to the general public, then you're exposing access to your ERP to the general public. But the platform, our guidance, our suggestion, how we implement things for people too, is to keep those communications happening over secure channels. So the data exiting the ERP or other systems and entering the BI and AI platform is doing so in a secure manner. Similarly, right, you're able to apply access controls at this level too. So you may or may not have the level of granular control around access to data that you would like on the ERP side or wherever your data is coming from. And the nice thing about this is you don't end up beholden to that. You certainly can replicate your security structures around, access controls to your data within this platform and just keep it one-to-one. But if you're in a situation where you've ever thought, I want to give this person access to some more information, but I want to keep it limited and not give them access to these 10 other things instead, you get more of an opportunity to do that here because you're getting the granular access controls down to the data set level and the assistant level. So an assistant being able to inherit security permissions of the user who's interacting with it. So that's very nice. The other benefit of it, and Tyler will talk about this stuff a little bit more, I believe, but just that you find that your interactions with it become very conversational. Right. So we've had such an evolution of how people get reports from systems over the years. And it really just used to be go have some developers put something together, IT staff put something together for me, and then serve that back to the business. That has evolved within the BI landscape. It is much more accessible to business users, but it's even more accessible when accessed through the assistants, right? You're now having a natural human conversation about the data with the system, which just removes the barriers to entry to go from concept to reality pretty quickly and some of this stuff. And then with that, getting the flexibility of being able to access the assistant, to have controls around how people interact with AI then through this platform, to keep it very limited to just a handful of users credentialed into this application, or to go as far as embedding assistants within other applications. We have an assistant that has context for all of the Rover public documentation that you can find at docs.zoomassist.com. So it's a publicly accessible assistant. Right. So it's nice to have that flexibility and know I've got an assistant trained to serve a function. And depending on the function, I can have that nice and limited in definition to a small scope of users, or I could have something that is, accessible to anybody with an internet connection. Right. Depends on your use case. It's very powerful to be able to serve both purposes there. From there, right, just back to like how things are talking between the systems. When you're working with Rover, we're doing everything. Rover ERP and this platform, everything is through secured API calls, right? If you happen to not be on Rover ERP and you're running on another system, it'll depend. The protocol used will depend on the platform that you're running your system on, and whether it's based on another flavor of PIC multi-value or if it's a SQL-based system. But the point is there are secure connection protocols available for all of those data sources. And so as long as you're applying the appropriate security on your end at the networking level to limit access there, you are able to maintain that control, that security all the way through, right? So you keep it all secure. It's very fast as a result for us to get Rover ERP customers up and running on this space because We know the data set very well. We have data sets prefabbed to get your tenant up and running, to get your Rover ERP data into the space to then be able to work with it. But that's not to say it's generally going to be dramatically slower for anybody not running on Rover ERP. It really does depend on your system at the end of the day and what capabilities you have or don't have there. But there's a lot of great options to get you up and running with your data in this environment, so that you can get to the fun stuff of creating assistants and engaging with AI. Again, talked about it a little bit, but you get to maintain your security posture. Whatever you're doing currently, you can continue to do that, carry those rules through, or expand upon them. So it's very powerful from that side. And the thing here, the peace of mind nature of knowing that you're interacting with models through private channels now, right? It's not an employee who's downloaded a spreadsheet and has uploaded it to ChatGPT and oops, they forgot to tell Chat not to train on the data. So now your stuff is out there accessible to everybody through the model interaction, right? All of our touches to any of the models out there are done through private API channels where there's no resharing, retraining of that data, propagation of the data and context beyond your stuff. So that keeps it very nice. Quentin's got a question in chat here real quick. You're saying it's possible for Rover AI to host a public web page of our own that could be accessible for all our employees with the internet connection, but it would have live data. Yeah, I mean, effectively, it gives you an assistant that you can use for that purpose, and you can serve that out as a link, but you can also embed that in other applications. So Quentin, you guys happen to also be using Rover Business Suite. We'll show at the very end of the call here, it's possible to have the assistant embedded in that too. So you have a bunch of options here in terms of how you would expose the assistants that you create to your employees, whether it's directly through the BI and AI platform or embedded within other applications once you've crafted the assistant within the platform. It's a great question. Tyler, I'm going to kick it back over to you.
Awesome. Yeah, great stuff and great question too. That's really an exciting part of it, in my opinion, is being able to provide a link for employees so they don't have to necessarily log into this, and then they can interact with it, conversationally. To me, that's really powerful. All right, we're gonna hop over to the platform now here. All right, so I'll just hop into an assistant right away just to show you what this looks like. So for those of you who have played around with ChatGPT a little bit, it should look similar as far as, you have your chat box. I'm just going to hit edit over here, and then you have some options here. So instructions are where we're going to put our build prompt. You can also add your logo. You can give it a name. Please name assistants better than I do. I'm pretty basic with the names, but it gets the job done. So then as far as connecting that data source or that knowledge base, it's as simple as once you have that connection on the platform, and I'll show you that here in a second where you do that, but it's as simple as adding a data set. So this is a file from our demo instance in Rover ERP, and I can filter it further here. I can select columns that I don't want the assistant to look at. So, you have some options right here to kind of narrow that down for the assistant. You can also add skills, and this is where stuff gets really fun and really exciting, in my opinion. We're not going to get into it on this one, but just know, this is where you can start calling APIs. This is where you can have it print visual charts. You can call functions to do more complex queries or calculations. You can search a specific website it's just, I mean, the possibilities are kind of endless there. And like I said, that's where things get really exciting. So let's just do an example here. I'm going to ask which 20% of customers drove 80% of orders year to date and who's slipping. Now, since I'm streaming here, we'll see how this goes. But while that's thinking, I want to hop over and show you how easy it can be to cleanse your data. So this is within a data set. So I'm making an API call to consume this data. But these flow steps is where things get really powerful. So the only one I have on this data set is modifying fields. So let's say you have some data coming in that that is, I might have to go back to this one and do that. Sorry, 1 second here. While that's loading, we'll go back and look at this. I must have left that open too long. So as you can see, just asking a question, I get an answer. And you can double click. Maybe you want to know, hey, for Krusty Krab, what products has really been driving this customer's sales? What products are they not buying from us? So as you can see, I mean, it's more of a natural way to engage with your data. Okay. So I'll hop back into this data set here and show you what I was talking about on being able to modify fields. So as I was saying, let's say you have, your fixed overhead is coming in as text, but you need it formatted as a number so you're able to do calculations and things like that. All you have to do is select what type of data you want that to be transformed to, and it's going to do that. But you have a lot of other flow steps available to you to do more complex things. So you can do a calculated field based off of maybe 2 or 3 or however many other columns in your data set, and it creates a new column with this calculation. You can add fields from another data source to create a joined view of that. You can normalize, which, basically if you have an array in one column, you can split that off into individual rows, so it's easier to query. And you can also do power scripts, and you can go crazy with those on really what's possible. Very complex calculations, adding fields, removing fields, whatever it may be. There's a lot of options available to you before that data hits your assistant. Better check the questions in chat here too, just to make sure I'm not missing anything. I know, Mike, you're answering them, but if there's anything I can
you're
show.
Okay so far. We
okay, awesome.
Come back on a couple of things.
Awesome. One thing I do want to come back on right now is showing how easy it is also to share this assistant. So clicking the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner here, you can either share to teams or users, which is going to basically, they would still need to log into Rover AI and they could access it that way, or you can generate an external link where you're actually able to just share that link and get them access. And Michael showed you too, he had mentioned about being able to put that into your Rover Business Suite. Very, very simple process and pretty cool to see in action. So one other thing I wanted to point out is, it doesn't have to be a data set directly from your ERP. Maybe you have some unstructured data or company policies or operating procedures that you just want to upload as a PDF or text or whatever it may be, you can do that too. So all you have to do is upload that file. And the example I have here is for an HRI assistant. So basically, it's a way to build a quote that adheres to government policy. This can be abstracted to other industries as well, but I can just ask this question, this is what I'm looking to quote, and I get an answer. And I do have that already pulled up just so you can see it. What this is doing is passing in some JSON from my request. It's basically extracting that from the request and doing a calculation on that data set I shared with it and giving you the available options. So that just to kind of get you to start thinking outside of reporting on your data, this can help you build quotes. This can help your customer service representatives ask or understand your company's policies. There's a lot of exciting stuff that you can do with it. And then one other one I wanted to show just to give you some examples here is kind of a shop floor assistant. So I'll hop into this one here and I'm going to ask cost variance by item, where are we consistently over plan? And again, I do have this one pulled up just so we can take a look for the sake of the webinar. But this is an example of calling that high charts skill. So what happened here is this assistant was actually able to create a chart for me showing that cost variance, which is pretty cool. I mean, I was talking to a customer a couple weeks ago, and to build an ad hoc report was taking him like an hour or two. So again, just to be able to do this in a matter of minutes instead is exciting. Mike, anything I'm missing that you think I should touch on?
I think if you can go back there to the config for a second, we'll just showcase some of the library options. There was some chatter on that of the floor open for these guys too, if they have like follow-up questions based off of my explanations. But yeah, here, if we go to add library files as the next option, this gives you an opportunity to tie into any libraries that you've associated with your environment over here. And we'll pivot in a second to show the library configuration side of it. I was explaining in chat, it's effectively creating an OAuth link between the platform and whatever your remote system of record is for that data. In this case, this is actually showing the GitHub repository that we have, which is a private one that contains the code for Rover Business Suite. So we have a development assistant over in this environment too that has access to a bunch of the source code, Rover ERP source code, Rover Business Suite source code, API gateway source code. And that's nice because then when integration questions come up or other technical questions, we can bounce that off the support assistant or the dev assistant, and it'll often find the right area of code we need to go look at. So you're not opening up Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio or Acterm for people on the pick side and doing a bunch of searches for things first to get where you need. It's pretty slick there. Yeah, if you cancel out of this and go back maybe to the main admin page, and we can show just what it looks like, yeah, to add a library here, right? So let's do that very briefly. Hit the menu up top left, and then go to libraries. This will show like the existing libraries that we've linked in. You can see there's a mixture of little OneDrive icons and GitHub icons. And if we hit the plus icon up top left, you'll see some library add options. So you can also pull content from Box and Google On the Microsoft side, it says OneDrive, but you can map it to a Teams location or a SharePoint location too. It's not limited just to stuff in OneDrive. Microsoft really has the same kind of storage architecture beneath the scenes for all that. The difference I called out in chat on this is on the stuff coming from your database, your ERP, that data is replicated into the platform in your tenant, so that you have a copy of the database over there that you can then perform some ETL on, like Tyler was talking about. Eric had a great question about that too. The libraries that you map in, your files in SharePoint, your source code in GitHub, whatever we're talking about there, that content doesn't get replicated into here. That's where the OAuth link comes into play. That just grants the platform access to go inspect what lives over there and generate tokens for it. So it has context for that stuff, which is very nice. In our case, like for the support assistant, it would have been potentially acceptable to build the support assistant with web search access to just go traverse docs.zoomassist.com and try to answer product questions that way. But there's still a few steps in that process. It's a lot faster to just give it access to the raw documentation, especially because it's in Markdown, which is effectively just text files, very human readable and AI readable. Anybody who's worked with AI to this point has noticed AI likes to show you things in Markdown a lot. So it's very good at reading Markdown too. Yeah, so cool stuff there. Catching up on questions. Cliff, this is single tenant for you. Like, so your tenant is not co-located with other stuff. Now we do have a cloud hosted solution where we can take care of the hosting for you. And it is multi-tenanted on that side, but you still have a separation from your tenant and other tenants. And the AI integrations that we do are tenant by tenant too. So we're never crossing streams here in terms of like, everybody's using the same API keys to talk to OpenAI's APIs and things like that. We keep things very delineated on that side. But the reality of this too is we also have some people who also just go full single tenant self-hosted on this. They're not forced to do things through our cloud hosting environment. Looks like Corey, I'm guessing maybe you will, or Jake will follow up with Eric here on the sales front. So cool. These are great questions so far. Do people have more? I can pivot real quick here, Tyler, if you want, and show just the assistant, the executive assistant that you had created embedded within the Rover Business Suite application too. So let me do that. For grins, and this will speak a little bit to Quentin. So I'm just logging into the sales demo environment copy of Rover Business Suite that we've got. It's running Rover ERP in the background. It also has a BI tenant in play. But here we've got the account executive assistant embedded within the Rover Business Suite application up here too. So you don't have to be in a position where you're granting the users access to this through the platform itself. Like we were talking about earlier, you can take the assistants and embed them in other applications. I also mentioned in chat, you can talk to the assistants using API calls as well, which is very nice when you're doing some external system workflow stuff. Yeah, our use case of that was when you email in to help@zoomassist.com, historically, you get a ticket automatically created for you and an automatic response out of our system, our Rover system. Now, what you also get is midstream, your questions being routed to our product support assistant to get an answer in real time to include in the automatic response to you. So it's like a nice evolution of things, and that's just happening through an API call from that workflow system into the AI assistant right there. Cliff, you'd be surprised. So I would say no, that it's not an issue. It depends on the path you end up taking for replication. There may be a little bit of lead time in that, depending on which way you go, but I would not be scared by the size of that. And if anything, on the database side, why I like the fact data is replicated over into the platform is it means then that anybody who's querying against it for dashboard purposes, for direct inspection purposes, or for AI purposes can't bring the ERP down, right? Especially when you have large data sets like that, right? Somebody going to TCL on your system and selecting all the sales orders, that's a lot of data for the system to be querying off of disk and queuing up for the response on the JBase side that absolutely has an impact on processing over there, right? And so now you get some peace of mind of knowing like business operations are going to keep rolling over here. And your CEO, cough, cough, Corey, cough, cough, isn't going to crash the system for everybody else while they're doing their day-to-day operations, right? Yeah, it looks like we got another. So Quentin, you'd be interested in some pricing stuff too. I think the team can definitely follow up with you on that because you're already a BI user, so you're like halfway in on the platform, right? I don't get up here. We'll ask this while I have it pulled up because I've been talking instead of demoing this, but we'll ask it your question, or we'll take the first one. And what you're going to see here is just the rest of the experience, even though it's embedded inside of the Rover Business Suite web application, we're getting the same experience of talking to the assistant that we were getting while Tyler was logged directly into the platform on the other side. We'll see what it does here to turn on that one. Jake's got that right, Quentin. That's correct. Must have a filthy open order backlog over here, I'm guessing. Picked a good same question to ask it. If you host with us, Cliff, your data is replicated into our hosting environment. Your data is not commingled with other customer data. There's tenant by tenant separation of data through all of that. If you're doing this yourself, then it is kind of up to however you want to separate your data on your side. You could still self-host and have a multi-tenanted solution over there too. So you're not single-tenanted with us in terms of collating your data with other customer data and collating your access and things like that. There's separation on that side between all of that and the AI conversations that are happening. This is a bad question to ask it over here. On your side, right, you can go as widespread or as limited as you like. Tyler, did you have a fun question that you liked asking it over here?
Yeah, it's a little difficult with the demo sales data, just because a lot of it isn't up to date. But how much cash is trapped in open orders and where? That's always a fun one. That was always a big concern on the distribution side. You have all these orders ready to go, and they're just sitting there. So.
Quentin, everything we've talked about up to this point is just read access, and it's not even accessing the ERP directly, right? When we get into the next webinar here, Tyler is kind of hat-tipped adding more skills to the assistants, and that's where you get into the territory of granting the assistant access to go do other things like take action, right? So you could then conceivably give it access to an API to be able to write some information back into the system if you wanted. Right, we could talk about this one too. I could conceptualize a scenario where you might give it access to write back into the platform and not write back into the ERP because those APIs are available too. And sometimes we do use those APIs to handle part of our ETL process. So I think generally you take that away as a yes. If you want to grant that access, you can do it, whether or not you're writing back into the ERP or back into some other area, right? You can give the assistants access to call any API that you have access to, whether it's one of yours or a third party's, right? It's very powerful there. So it really would I think that conversation would become more of a what's your use case kind of a thing.
Brings up a good point too about just building your assistants when they are writing back to your ERP, building them in a way where there's that human in the loop. that is going to, you know, confirm before that action is taken. I think we're still in a stage where that's pretty important. I don't know if we'll be there forever, but right now I think that's best practice.
I would tend to agree with that. You're probably not rolling an assistant tomorrow to cut all of the checks for payroll or things like that, right? Even AP check runs, you probably still want some accounting controls around those things, but certainly having assistants that are sending emails or progressing, closing out old orders or things like that, right? Taking some just low level steps around the system that you would normally have someone sitting behind the screen just pushing buttons and not thinking too much. Yeah, starting simple and keeping it small is huge, and getting those quick wins is also nice for the organization, right? Which is why for us, we put a big focus into a lot of the support touches and the dev touches too. How can we make quality of life better for the support team, for the dev team, and then for the customers on the support side too? Start there. I give it another 2 years before Corey has his CTO assistant talking about this stuff instead of me, and I'm catch me out on the curbside looking for work.
14 months.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Any other questions on that aspect?
You want to pop back to the slide deck and we can close it out?
Yeah.
And of course, if people have more questions along the way here, we can hang and answer.
Awesome. So yeah, I mean, I think the main takeaway that I want you to get from today is just the importance of having a platform to build these assistants on. Because again, what ultimately ends up happening is you have a bunch of these assistants on ChatGPT and you're constantly uploading data to them. And at some point, it just really isn't worth it. So to be able to automate that step, you're really capturing that value that AI is going to deliver. So, yeah, any closing remarks, Mike?
No, I think that's it, especially for Quentin and the other folks in the conversation who are a little bit more IT oriented and been mindful of that side for the organization, right? You get a bit more peace of mind when you know you're controlling the platform and access points and everything else.
Yep. Yeah. We will definitely follow up with you, Quentin. And also, real quick shout out to the 3-minute readiness assessment, roverdata.com/AI/assessment. So literally it takes 3 minutes and it can give you kind of an idea on a good next step. I know a few of you were asking in chat what a next step would look like. Take 3 minutes, give that a shot, and then schedule a demo and see this platform work on your own data. So things always click a little better when you have that context of your own business. And to me, it really provides that light bulb moment where you see the value that this is going to bring your company. So I'd really encourage you to just take the assessment and schedule a quick demo. Cliff's got another question for us. Where would the biggest exposure of our data be? Our company is very security minded and also data privacy minded.
Yeah, the first thing would be on how you determine you want to allow access to that data for the platform. And I say that just because I've seen customers running in production with Telnet for a universe system exposed to the internet, right? And so when you're starting there, you guys probably aren't if you're already very security minded, but making sure you avoid opening up a hole for the platform to talk to your system that is accessible to general public internet, right? Because now you're potentially letting anybody in. So if you keep that secure, then you can really think about this as like you've taken your security fence that you already have strong around your system, and you're expanding that by building right into our fence right? And we're not going to do anything to publicly expose the data on our side. The backups are secured in our cloud environment. Like I mentioned, data is kept single tenanted and everything on that side. Even though the application system itself is multi-tenanted, the data storage and everything is still separated out at the tenant level. So yeah, Cody's got a question around prompt injection and echo chamber attacks and stuff like that. And so some of this is model specific because we drive everything based off of other models, right? You're going to get some amount of baseline here in terms of what, say, OpenAI does to not allow for those types of questions, those types of scenarios to play out with their stuff. A lot of this responsibility then falls on you in terms of your assistant configuration, because you're sitting there configuring the assistant, providing instructions, telling it what to do and what not to do, right? So you're getting an access channel into that where you have an opportunity to influence that. If you've not worked with assistant configuration through APIs versus through what they make available in the web platforms, their web platforms, I will tell you it is dramatically more limited when you're going through the APIs. So there is a higher baseline of protection applied to the conversations that are happening with the models through the API calls versus what you get if you sit down, log into chatgpt.com and start to have a conversation there, or even if you were to roll a GPT on that side. So it does become important for whoever's implementing this, whether you have us doing it for you, or if you have, in-house implementation happening, that you do put some attention to this just to see what you can and can't get away with. I'll use the product support assistant that we have as an example because it's a public-facing assistant. It's got very strict instruction not to answer stuff that doesn't have anything to do with the product docs, basically, and to avoid getting cute around that stuff too. Like you can't ask it how to build a SaaS application that would integrate with Rover Point of Sale or something like that and get it to start churning out code for you as well. So it's like a security minded thing for us, and also some context for it being a publicly accessible access point to a model where someone could effectively just get free AI work, right? Like we don't want you building your business up using AI tokens that we're paying for here, right? That's correct. Yeah, and we did a healthy amount of that too with the support assistant before we opened up access to that to the public. I'd share some of the screenshots of the internal chats, but you could imagine we had some fun with that, right?
One thing to add to that too, first off, I mean, great question. Awesome to hear that you're thinking about that. But it's also why it's important to only give that assistant, as I'm sure you know, but only give that that assistant access to the bare minimum for the data that it needs. Don't open it up to the whole system. For one, it's going to affect performance, and two, it's a security risk. So yeah, great that you're thinking about that, but there's some things you can do there within the platform to protect against that.
I will come back to Cody's question in a minute because I think there's like a MCP adjacent conversation you could have there. But Cliff, right now everything is OpenAI driven, but coming soon is also access to Google and Anthropic stuff. And then beyond that, there will be an opportunity to run your own models and talk to them too. So I don't have timelines quite yet on that stuff. We didn't show it today. We may show it in the next webinar, but a demo environment that does have access to the other models. We didn't show it today because there's also other feature functionality changes to the assistant conversation in that environment. It's not simply the addition of other models as options. You can get into some other cool stuff with it too that goes beyond even some of the limitations of all the cool skills-based stuff that we've been alluding to and kind of briefly mentioning here today. Cody, back on the security side of it real quick too, like the argument for a platform like this for me becomes some of the better control on the security side versus going your own path and instituting your own models and then having to orchestrate your own MCP around those models is like, you know, a big drawback of MCP, in spite of how easy it is to work with and fast it is to get going, is that it doesn't enforce a security posture with it, right? So you're like, cool, you just set all this stuff up and it's great, but whoops, you also just exposed a big path into your systems beyond just your data potentially, because presumably that MCP is helping proxy into API access and other stuff too. So using a platform like this to get you there, it keeps you from having to worry too much about rolling your own MCP stuff and then having to layer security on top of that too, because you're just getting the security posture on the platform side as a part of it, in addition to everything that you're doing from the security side already. Love these questions. This is great. Webinars are so much fun when we get this good engagement from the crowd.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sean, to answer your question, you would need to define that, but that's just a flow step when you're setting up that data set. So basically, you'd go in, you would say fields from another data set, and then you would choose, like you were saying, which column you want to join those data sets on. So very simple to do.
It's not a one, it's like it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive either, right? You can absolutely have your quotes data set over there and your orders data set, and then you can choose to extend either of them with flow steps that are converging. You could have a third data set that is collating all of it together. You could have orders as a base copy and then a copy of order. Like, this is really like a depends thing, like you said, and no real limitation in terms of optionality then beyond it. I would call out what Tyler is saying is doing the work to associate the data programmatically first is great, rather than saying, I'm just going to give the AI assistant access to the orders table and the quotes table, and I'm going to tell it how they relate to one another. Yeah, it'll get it right, depending on the cleanliness of the data most of the time, but you are still dealing with like a non-deterministic system, right? So if you can just make that simpler, just like you would make it simpler for a new hire joining the organization and take care of the programmatic associations, you know, low-hanging fruit there, it keeps things even simpler for the assistant configuration, right? Which is huge, because then you get better performance too, better quality output, better performance. It's having to do less thinking before it starts to answer questions for you, versus if it has to go join all the tables together first, you're losing time there, right? Depends on the data set, Quentin. So if you wanted to do that, you know, it supports push and pull. So you don't like, and with that, you don't have to set a replication rule that applies to every single table or data set. You could have one data set that you know doesn't change day to day. So you just synchronize it once a week. You could have another that you synchronize constantly. And because of the push capability, and your BI tenant is already set up to work this way for some of your data sets that I'm aware of, some of your data, as it's written into the ERP, is put into a queue that is monitored in real time and immediately pushed into the BI system. So, and the beauty of that too is, again, you stay in control of, you don't have to synchronize everything in real time if it doesn't make sense to synchronize everything in real time. So that one gets down to, yep, you can go real time from a technical perspective. Now it's just about what makes sense for your organization, right? And to Sean's point too, if you're doing the pull-based approach, you can also just do upserts on that side too. So not everything has to be push-driven on that side, but the two-way flexibility is very nice. I love the fact that Sean's answering some questions here in chat for us too. It's good to see you, Sean. It's been a minute. Any final questions here?
real quick, John, I just want to show, because totally understand hoping to do less work, but to bring in fields from another data set, I can join like this and decide which fields I want to bring in. So, you're not writing SQL statement. It's pretty drag and drop to get what you need. So you can move pretty quick there, which is nice. Thank you everybody for joining. Really great questions. Like Mike said, that was fun. It's fun when a webinar is engaging. If you want to learn a little about agents, which we kind of teased in this webinar, you can register by scanning that QR code, or we'll send out a follow-up email as well with the recording and link to register for part 3. So thanks again, everybody.